The Ottawa Senators are trying to battle their way back into the playoffs. Brandon Pillar of Locked On Senators joins us to discuss that and what moves they may make at the trade deadline. All that and more on today's Locked On NHL podcast.
You're Locked On NHL, your daily podcast on the National Hockey League. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome, everybody, to the Monday edition of the Locked On NHL podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I want to thank everyone who makes Locked On NHL your first listen every day. Don't forget to subscribe on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts so you can get new episodes as soon as they drop. Today's episode is brought to you by Sleeper. Download the Sleeper app and use promo code LOCKEDONNHL to get up to a $100 match on your first deposit. Terms and conditions apply. See Sleeper's terms of use for details. It is my pleasure to welcome back to the show the co-host of Sens Central, Locked On Ottawa Senators, Brandon Pillar. And Brandon, couple of wins before the All-Star break. Senators trying to claw their way back into the playoff hunt. What's been the difference in recent games that have seen them start to accumulate some wins?
Yeah, Gil, it's nice to see the Sens start to sprinkle a couple wins into the schedule. The losses were piling up, and being at the bottom of the standings for an extended amount of time was getting old for this team. So they're doing their best to climb out here, but unfortunately they got a long way to go. But recently, you mentioned it, they've had some success, 2 straight overtime wins. I would say the thing that's really starting to work for the Sens, and it's kind of unfortunate that there's a bye week halting their momentum, is it seems like the players are starting to figure out Jacques Martin's systems, right? You go from a coach in DJ Smith that is, as a person, much more relaxed than Jacques. Dump and chase offense, hardworking physical play is what he expects out of guys, playing with pace, things like that. Whereas now with Jacques, you're looking for more of a defensive structure, tighter defensively, hoping that will help out the goalies who have been struggling this year in Ottawa. And it has seen an uptick for Joonas Korpisalo, at least recently. And just keeping the puck out of your own net so you can build momentum with all those really talented offensive players that they do have up front. So I think when you look at Jacques Martin's first 10 games, it wasn't great for the Sens. But then when you do the split and look at his next 10 games, they're starting to figure it out, and it's starting to result in some wins.
Besides the goaltenders, who are some of the players who have benefited the most from the coaching change?
Well, I would say I think you're looking at Tim Stützle over time is going to benefit because everyone knows what he can do offensively, right? Like he put up big numbers last year. He's leading the team in points this year, but he's got some work to do on the defensive side of his game when it comes to being a bit more of a two-way centerman, because he's their number one center. So often nights, Gil, he's going up against the top dogs on other teams. So you want to see him be able to play a bit more of a better defensive game, and having someone that has the defensive focus and the wisdom that Jacques Martin has with all his experience, that's going to go a long way to help out a young centerman like Tim Stützle.
The goals against are still problematic, but seem to be improving. I mean, 5 goals against in the last 2 wins that you mentioned. What else is Martin doing to try to get those goals against down consistently?
Well, I think that's why he was the right type of coach to come in for the interim basis, especially after DJ Smith struggled, because everyone knows, or at least people in Ottawa, I should say, or people who are familiar with Jacques Martin, he is a defensively minded coach. And this team, when the offseason was happening and they were acquiring pieces and putting everything together, Sens fans were kind of under the impression like, hey, we got a nice decor here. Like, this should really help us out. But then it didn't exactly click. The defensive structure wasn't good and things like that. So Jacques Martin comes in and he starts putting a lot more focus on defensive structure, which I think for a goalie like Joonas Korpisalo, who's kind of been the main guy here since Anton Forsberg has been hurt, that's really helped him be able to settle in a little bit more and not have to make those big acrobatic athletic saves that he's had to make, which look great and it's awesome for the highlight reel. But if you're relying on making those crazy sprawling saves, probably means you're out of position or the defense in front of you is letting really good scoring opportunities happen for their opponents. So if you can tighten up that defensive structure, which it really feels like Jacques Martin has this decor doing in turn, that should help your goalies. And we've seen in a small sample size, couple games here, Uniscore Pasal start to be a little bit more successful.
How about special teams? It's been an issue there, in the 20s in both the PK and the power play. Any changes there that you see hopefully paying some dividends?
Well, Daniel Alfredsson, a legend in Ottawa Senators universe, is the assistant coach, or he's on the bench. I forget if he's assistant or associate, what the exact title is, but he's been the guy that's been in charge of the power play. And everyone knows how good of a player Alfredsson was back in his day. So he's been trying to get the power play going. Unfortunately, it hasn't quite worked out. Like they've gone 0 for a lot of games recently. So the power play still is struggling, but we trust in Alfie, Gil. Don't worry. He's going to turn it around here eventually. But the penalty kill has been better. Low bar when you've been 32nd, 31st, or 30th, hovering around the worst penalty killing teams in the league. And often those teams near the bottom are tanking teams. So not where you want to be when it comes to penalty killing or at all near those teams, but they've been better. And that's really helped. And I think that goes along with what we were talking about earlier, where just the overall defensive structure has been better. So the penalty killing has been better and the goaltending has been better, which everyone knows goaltending is a massive, massive part of being able to successfully kill off penalties.
Yeah, you always want your goalie to be one of your best penalty killers.
Yeah. He's got to bail you out sometimes.
Yeah, exactly. Because someone's always open. So, yeah. Trade deadline is now about a month away. What do you think the Senators are looking to do, and how active do you think they'll be?
It's going to be an interesting trade deadline because obviously, unfortunately, the Senators are very far away from a playoff spot. So I don't think you're going to see the executives go for a big push, especially you're not going to see a rental. But the interesting twist on this is finally going to be the first opportunity, first trade deadline under new owner, Michael Andlauer, new general manager, Steve Staios, new senior vice president of hockey operations, Dave Poulin. Like, this is a whole new brain trust for the Ottawa Senators. So I could anticipate that we see them try to put their mark on this team now that the old group is cleaned out and they want to start making some changes. The big rumor that's been going around, Elliot Friedman has been talking about this seemingly on a daily basis. So you got to think that there's some truth to what he's saying. Really connected insider. He's been saying that the Ottawa Senators have been linked to Chris Tanev of the Calgary Flames. It seems he's always talking about it. So there's got to be some constant communication going on there. And the rumor is that Calgary Flames would be looking for a second round pick plus. So probably plus a prospect. So the Ottawa Senators have to decide, all right, if that is the going price, are we willing to give up some draft capital, which we need? In the Athletic, Scott Wheeler ranked the Ottawa Senators prospect pool 31 out of 32. Gil, I believe you're familiar with the team that was dead last in that, so we can be familiar with where our prospect pools are at. So is it worth trading a second round pick? Not going to help your prospect pool if you're trading away high picks like that, plus a prospect, so taking even more away to get a veteran blue liner that's on an expiring deal, and he could be a UFA after. So I think they're sniffing around that trade, but I believe it's going to be more likely to happen if Chris Tanev is willing to sign an extension and come over. Then the Ottawa Senators would feel more comfortable because they need some veteran presence on that blue line, and they need a right shot defenseman. Too many lefties in that decor, and it doesn't seem to be a recipe for success.
Anybody who you think might be heading out of Ottawa at the deadline?
That's an interesting one, too, because you look at free agent signing, 1-year deal, Vladimir Tarasenko at $5 million. He's having a nice season. Now, is it the Vladimir Tarasenko of old that's scoring 30 goals easily? No, not quite. He's got 13 goals, 20 assists, 33 points in 45 games, but plus 11. The nice thing about Tarasenko with the Senators is he's shown he's not just a goal scorer. He's not just a sniper. He's got no B game. He's been playing with a physical edge. He's been a really good playmaker that's been able to move up and down the lineup for the Sens. And it just seems like he's a guy that's fitting in with this group. I don't know, obviously not in the locker room, but chemistry-wise, it seems like he's a good fit here. So hopefully, I would like the Ottawa Senators to sign him to a reasonable extension, maybe 3 years at around similar dollar amount that he's making now, $5 million. Because if the Ottawa Senators are going to make a push, they need veteran guys like him to help them, those young guys, go through the rigors of an 82-game season and hopefully playoffs beyond, which Vladimir Tarasenko, Stanley Cup champion, also lots of playoff experience. So that's a guy I would rather keep rather than trade away for draft picks, because then in the offseason, you're like, okay, we traded away Vladimir Tarasenko. How do we get our hands on a Vladimir Tarasenko type now? And you already had one. So if he's willing to sign an extension, I would like for them to keep him. I think the obvious move is, it's really unfortunate, but Dominik Kubalik simply has not worked out for the Ottawa Senators. He's found himself a healthy scratch most nights, 9 goals, 3 assists, 12 points in 43 games. But unlike Tarasenko, the plus-minus is brutal for Kubalik, -20. He's mostly been on the fourth line. And again, Tarasenko has shown a B game. Kubalik, if he's not scoring, he's got a great shot. But if he's not scoring, he's not really contributing to this team, unfortunately. So I think you're going to see the Ottawa Senators simply move him for a late pick just to move that cap space and free up that roster space for some of the fringe players that are looking to make an impact on the NHL roster eventually.
Brandon, why don't you tell our viewers and our listeners where they could find the podcast and where they could find you and your co-host on social media?
Yeah, absolutely. So on X, we are at Sens Central, the Locked On Senators podcast. We're on Instagram, lockedon.senators, and it's your team every day. You know that, Gil. So we got podcasts going on Apple, Spotify. Those are the audio ones. If you want to watch us on YouTube, we're on YouTube every day. And we just can't get enough of Ottawa Senators hockey, Gil. So we do a live show after every Ottawa Senators hockey. We call it the postcast. We always get the chat engaged, and you get our immediate reaction to any Sens game, which, with the way the Sens are, we could be joyful or absolutely miserable. So tune in to find out which one of those happens after the Sens games on the postcast on YouTube.
Never a dull moment with you guys. Brandon, thank you so much for joining us today.
No problem. My pleasure.
Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Happy Super Bowl to all who celebrate from FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. If you're like me, Super Bowl Sunday is all about scoring the best seat on the couch, grabbing your favorite football snacks, and placing some super bets. FanDuel has so many ways for you to end the season with a W or 2 or even 3. Not only can you bet on who will win Super Bowl 58 between San Francisco and Kansas City, but FanDuel also has bets for which players will score a touchdown, how many points will be scored, and so much more. New customers join today and you'll get $200 in bonus bets if your first bet of $5 or more wins. Just visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to sign up. That's FanDuel.com/LockedOn. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL.